Hello and welcome to another installment of Liberty Nation's Swamponomics videocast. I'm Andrew Moran, Ellen's economics correspondent. Each week, I dive into the morass of top economic news stories and fish out compelling narratives or arbitrary fallacies that have been accepted as conventional wisdom by the swamp creatures for years. This week, the Federal Reserve cannot know the neutral rate. For months, the top heads of the US Central Bank, from Jerome Powell to Charles Evans to Raphael Bostic, claimed that the institution's target for a neutral rate is somewhere between 2.4 and 2.5%. A neutral rate is when the Fed funds rate neither spurs nor restricts economic growth. Since the start of the coronavirus pandemic, the benchmark interest rate has been nearly zero to stimulate the economy and flooding the country with easy money. For much of the 21st century, the key rate has been historically low, but when it is higher, it generally results in limited economic growth, higher unemployment rates, and weaker gains in the stock market. The art of central banking is meant to choose the right interest rate that functions more like throwing darts at the dartboard. But how does the Fed know that 2.4% is a neutral rate anyway? Hint, it doesn't. This is the chief problem behind Keynesian economics, thinking that the smartest men and women inside the Eccles building can pull the levers and know exactly every component of the entire economy, whether it is the time preferences of consumers or the credit conditions of businesses. Of course, this has been the go-to panacea and position of the monetary regime for decades, but it is this thinking, the fatal conceit if you will, that has triggered many of the major economic woes over the last century, from the Great Depression to the 70s stagflation to the Great Recession to today's debacle. So, what is the answer exactly? It's simple. Adopt a more market-oriented assessment of interest rates rather than a centralized building that chooses to raise or cut rates at random. A natural interest rate, which spawns from the Austrian School of Economics, would begin in the marketplace and then be developed through borrowing and lending activity. The rate would be determined through resource allocation, be it present-day consumption or future investment. Put simply, a natural rate mirrors the time preferences or pattern of consumption over time of the private market. Now, this is a far cry from the current 12 people who sit on the Federal Open Market Committee, or FOMC. It is the Federal Reserve that manipulates the economy and distorts the market by setting interest rates, which can force consumers to save or spend more, based on what the Fed thinks the economy needs at any given moment. The Federal Reserve achieves this through arbitrary money printing schemes, and this is absolutely dangerous. As economist Frank Shostak wrote for the Mises Institute in June 2020, quote, "As time goes by, however, the increase in money supply gives rise to price inflation, which undermines the individual's well-being and leads to a general increase in time preferences. This change in time preferences means that individuals' willingness to invest and lend is lowered. For example, the demand for money is raised and works to lower the monetary surplus. This puts upward pressure on interest rates. Individuals now reduce their purchasing of assets, thereby exerting downward pressure on asset prices and lifting their yields." So if the free market were in charge of interest rates right now, it would likely demand rates to be much higher, even higher than the Fed's now target of 2.5%. Heck, it might even be higher than St. Louis Fed Bank President James Baldwin's dream of 3.5% by the end of 2022. Suffice it to say, the Fed can never know what the real or neutral rate is because it is not an apotheosis that knows and sees all. The economy is a complex place where consumers, businesses, and investors have different needs at different times. But the central bankers will never concede this is a system primarily about control. It is comparable to what author Henry Hazlitt wrote in the seminal 1946 book Economics in One Lesson. Quote, "An enormous literature is based on this fallacy, and, as so often happens with doctrines of the sort, it has become part of an intricate network of fallacies that mutually support each other." That's it for me this week. Please read my full Swamponomics column on the pages of LibertyNation.com, where I discuss Joe Biden's bizarre speech on the economy, Vladimir Putin and the Fed, and the Eccles building and stocks. Thank you.
We're doing it for real, really real. Liberty Nation And Jeff Charles, contributor for LibertyNation.com.
I think we're starting to make an impact. Liberty style, fight for freedom.
The tracking poll sponsored by Liberty Nation for Thursday.
Mentioned by Dan Bongino, Rasmussen, Jordan Peterson, and
I can
others.
do it again if you want me to.
Cited in Mark Levin's American Marxism.
I think we're starting to make a really big impact. Get noticed. We're doing it. Rock on. I'm gone.